Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, The Outsider's View from June 22nd. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but you don't want to drag down your entire life by listening to the news every day, then get the main stories right here once a week and spend the rest of your time actually living your best life. Let's get right into it. As President Trump presided over the celebration of the United States Army's 250th anniversary, No Kings protest erupted into violence elsewhere. Multiple rioters were arrested near Portland's ICE facility after police declared that the protests had devolved into yet another riot. During the attack, rioters threw rocks, launched fireworks, and threw smoke grenades at federal law enforcement. Officials say at least 4 officers were injured. We also saw new violence in Los Angeles. Law enforcement there had to use tear gas and other crowd control measures to clear out the rioters last weekend. Salt Lake City's No Kings protest featured a shooting. Police said that 3 people were taken into custody, including the shooting suspect, whose motive is being investigated. These No Kings demonstrations were planned in response to Trump's decision to hold a massive celebration for the U.S. Army to mark the 250th anniversary of their founding in 1775, 1 year before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The keffiyeh-wearing No Kings protesters chanted, "Kill yourself," in the faces of the troops. But they failed to dampen the mood of patriots who unapologetically celebrate the awesomeness that is our military every day that we get to breathe the free air of America. Now, in a follow-up to last week's story, the assassin, who is the suspect in the killing of a Minnesota state lawmaker after critically injuring another, was captured by authorities late Sunday night after a 2-day-long manhunt. The nation was shocked early Saturday morning when Democrat State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, were left in critical condition after being shot inside their home. Police, fearing the crime was politically motivated, proactively checked the homes of several other lawmakers, including Melissa Hortman, the top Democrat in the state house. When officers arrived at her house, they found what appeared to be a police SUV with flashing blue lights in the driveway, and a man dressed as a police officer exiting the house. That man immediately opened fire on police before fleeing the scene on foot. When the officers searched the home, they found Melissa Hortman and her husband had both been murdered. The killer was able to flee the area on foot and make his way to another car, but authorities were able to quickly identify the suspect as 57-year-old Vance Bolter, a Minnesota man with no criminal history. While Bolter escaped the crime scene, by 10 o'clock on Sunday night he was in custody after being caught hiding in a patch of woods. As we covered last week, police revealed that a manifesto was found in Bolter's car, but they have yet to make it public. They are, however, confident that this violence was politically motivated. Authorities say a list of potential targets was also found in Bolter's car, which reportedly included a number of prominent Democrats, along with abortion providers in the state. There was also a pile of No Kings protest flyers. The suspect's roommate told reporters that he believed Bolter had voted for Trump, but the roommate admitted that he didn't know what Bolter's views were on state politics. In addition to allegedly voting for Trump, an assertion which can't be entirely verified, as you know voting is anonymous, Bolter also had documented ties to the Democrat governor Tim Walz, who appointed him to be on his workforce development board back in 2019. The previous Democrat governor, Mark Dayton, had also appointed Bolter to the same position 4 years before that, in 2016. So his politics remain somewhat unclear at this point, but like all people who resort to violence over politics, he is clearly extremely mentally unstable. At least no one is publicly celebrating this particular killer, or starting fan clubs for him, which is, at the very least, an improvement on the recent status quo. In the wider world, Israel and Iran continue to trade very asymmetrical blows, and the situation is likely to continue evolving quickly. Since launching Operation Rising Lion, Israelis have carried out more than 700 different strikes against Iran's nuclear sites, military, and the leaders of the Islamic regime. In retaliation, Iran has fired hundreds of drones and missiles at Israeli civilians living in densely populated cities. However, Iran is clearly outmatched, given that many of Israel's key military platforms, including the F-16s and F-35 fighters, both of which have featured prominently in its air war against Iran, are all American-made, and the two countries are also close allies. The fact that the Israelis attacked the day after Donald Trump's 60-day deadline expired also suggests that there was some degree of coordination between the two countries. Publicly, President Trump has pressured Tehran to abandon its nuclear program in exchange for peace. And contrary to the expert analysis on X, this is not two sluggers having it out in a close call. This is one side landing a couple of jabs, in between getting beaten to a bloody pulp. That is the reality. In Israel, as of Tuesday, there have been 22 tragic civilian deaths and a few damaged buildings, including a single infrastructure target, an oil refinery in Haifa. That's it. No Israeli leaders have been killed. No military targets have been hit. No significant infrastructure has been destroyed. Compare that to the utter destruction to the Iranian regime. Both of Iran's nuclear facilities have been hit, one possibly destroyed, along with a third nuclear facility. 8 very high-level regime leaders are dead. 9 out of the 12 top nuclear scientists are dead. Mossad is everywhere like ghosts in the ether, pulling off unbelievable feats that make James Bond look tame. Fighter jets have complete control over Iran's skies, attacking and even refueling in broad daylight virtually unopposed. The IDF has reported that it has destroyed more than 70 Iranian air defense batteries since the start of Operation Rising Lion. 15 top military leaders have been killed. Iran has been forced to launch smaller and smaller missile attacks at Israel because its capabilities have been so degraded by the Israeli strikes. According to IDF assessments, Iran is not even trying to conserve its missiles for a longer war, but rather they are struggling just to coordinate under the comprehensive barrage of Israeli attacks. Iran's state media has been destroyed, as has its incredibly outdated Air Force of F-14s, which haven't been high-tech for nearly 50 years. Iran's major bank has been hacked. Even their ally China is telling its own citizens to get out of Iran. Literally all that Iran has left is Fordo, Khamenei, and the actual oil fields, all of which Israel could easily take out. And out of that list, Fordo is going to go. And Khamenei is on the table. When it comes to the reality on the ground right now, Iran's nuclear facilities, mainly the underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordo, even though they are hardened against conventional attacks, the large bunker-busting bombs that are part of America's inventory could unquestionably break through their defenses. Now, Israel lacks their own equivalent stockpile and has therefore asked America to join the air campaign for a single strike, and the world waits to see what will happen. But believe me, Israel has a plan for that mountain under which Fordo lies, because Israel has a plan for everything, and they always have. As far as outside support for Iran goes, their own terrorists in Hezbollah haven't even come to their aid. Putin says he's out, and he means it. Putin didn't even interfere for Assad, who was way more important to him as an ally. All he did for that guy was to let him crash in his country, nothing more. And it won't be any different for the Ayatollahs. Putin asked Trump on their behalf to make Israel stop, and Trump said, "No, I don't want to. And that was as far as Putin was willing to go. He basically told the Iranian regime, sorry guys, I tried. China isn't making a move except to pull its people out of Iran too. Iran has nothing left. So this is not an even match or a close call, despite the backseat drivers and war experts on internet platforms. Nor is it a conflict that is in danger of spreading, because the Iranian regime stands alone. Not even its own people support it. A ground invasion is not going to happen because, one, it's not needed, and two, Tehran is as far away from Israel as Orlando is from LA. Are the Israelis going to march through a bunch of hostile countries to get to Iran, whose population there will outnumber them 10 to 1, even if the entire nation of Israel marched there? For what? I would just point out that the people prophesying doom right now are the same people who made the same predictions when Trump struck at Iran by killing Soleimani. And what came of their prophecies of world war back then? Not a damned thing. Nothing happened. And on that same subject, it's also not true that MAGA is splitting over these fear-mongers. They make up a tiny but very loud fringe, that is all. Their only option is to strike out on their own and form a very tiny camp full of the end is near cultists, because they have nowhere to go where they would be in the majority. They think that they're huge just because they're loud, but the reality is that they have to be so loud because they are such a small minority. Their group basically consists of Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, apparently Tulsi Gabbard, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and of course their own version of Jasmine Crockett, spewing the same low IQ bigotry with the same pride, Candace Owens. By the way, notable people who agree with this crowd are AOC and Bernie Sanders, both of which are known to be the very definition of MAGA, so all I can say is that the horseshoe theory of the fringe is very real. Despite this, Tucker Carlson continues to claim that his views represent MAGA, not the views of the man who created MAGA, and considering that Tucker's views mirror AOC and Bernie's views, he can call them MAGA if he wants to, but MAGA isn't exactly known to be big fans of the squad. Unless the world went topsy-turvy and somebody forgot to tell me. The bottom line is that Tucker is just wrong, as per usual. The polls prove it. Nearly 80% of Trump voters, aka MAGA, support having the U.S. provide offensive weapons to Israel. To be specific, the Gray House poll surveyed 450 Trump voters on June 15th and 16th. 35% of those viewers were Tucker's main audience of people over the age of 65. 33% of them were between 50 and 64. 26% were between 30 and 49, and 7% were between 18 and 29 years old. 60% were male, and 40% were female. So this was a wide cross-section of every group inside MAGA. Yet the polls found that nearly 80% of Trump voters across the spectrum support having the U.S. provide offensive weapons to Israel. They back Trump's views on this, not Tucker's. In addition, the poll found that 72% of these voters support the United States getting directly involved and taking military action in the form of a single strike to prevent the Iranian regime from developing nuclear weapons. You were saying, Tucker. This poll is only made up of MAGA voters. 80% of them felt that Iran is a destabilizing force that sponsors terrorism, threatens United States allies, and undermines American interests throughout the region. 72% of them said Iran was a serious threat to the United States' national security. 86% of Trump voters back Israel's strikes on Iran and support us giving Israel defensive weapons to protect itself from Iranian attacks. 91% of them agree that the United States should provide Israel with intelligence for the same reason. 73% felt that a diplomatic deal with Iran could not be trusted, and that it was likely that Iran would still try to develop nuclear weapons in secret. On a separate issue, 85% of these Trump voters support Israel's military action against Hamas in Gaza. You lose, Tucker. Your tribe has voted you off the island. Bye. In that same camp is apparently our Director of National Security, Tulsi Gabbard, which is probably why she was not invited to attend President Trump's June 8th Camp David retreat, where he convened senior national security officials to discuss the Middle East, according to the White House correspondent for Fox News, Peter Dosey. The new development was reported only hours after Trump publicly dismissed Gabbard's March testimony in front of Congress, where she said that Iran did not appear to be building a nuclear weapon. Trump responded to that claim by saying, "I don't care what she said, I think they were very close to having one." The International Atomic Energy Agency agrees with Trump, by the way, not with Tulsi. During her testimony before Congress, even she acknowledged that, quote, Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest levels and is unprecedented for a state without a nuclear weapon. When asked to respond to Trump's comments, Gabbard backed the president, saying that there was no conflict between his stance on Iran and her prior statements to Congress. For her part, Tulsi seems to be trying to close the gap that appears to lay between her position and Trump's. A senior intelligence official told Axios that Gabbard's testimony does not contradict Trump's statement that Iran is close to building a nuclear weapon. The official said, just because they don't have one does not mean that they don't want to build one. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is trying to bridge the gap between these different viewpoints within the administration, but on Tuesday he seemed to indicate where he would land if forced to choose a side. As Israel continues to conduct airstrikes targeting Iranian military leaders, missile launchers, and nuclear facilities, questions swirled online about potential United States involvement in the conflict. In the face of this torrent of speculation, Vance praised Trump for showing remarkable restraint in keeping our military's focus on protecting our troops and protecting our citizens. He may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. Vance acknowledged that some of the president's supporters, quote, are right to be worried about foreign entanglement after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy, but I believe the president has earned some trust on this issue. And having seen this up close and personal, I can assure you that he is only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. Whatever he does, that is his focus. In his post, Vance also pointed to Trump's consistent stand, which has for more than 2 decades fiercely opposed Iran's push for uranium enrichment, adding, quote, I have yet to see a single good argument for why Iran needed to enrich uranium well above the threshold for civilian use. I have yet to see a single good argument for why Iran was justified in violating its non-proliferation obligations. I have yet to see a single good pushback against the IAEA's findings, end quote. When it comes to President Trump himself, he has backed Israel's strikes on Iran, saying early on Tuesday that he's not interested in a ceasefire between the two enemies. A reporter asked Trump, what specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for? The president replied, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end. So something that will be permanent? Yeah, or giving up entirely, that's okay too. A complete give up, that's possible. Meanwhile, on the battlefield itself, the war between Israel and Iran continues to escalate. On Monday, the two sides began targeting energy facilities in addition to military strikes. Iran, as we previously noted, successfully struck an Israeli oil refinery in Haifa, while the Israelis targeted multiple natural gas and oil refineries all throughout Iran. One of those strikes caused major damage to Tehran's largest fuel depot. Another strike on Monday targeted Iran's state-sponsored media. Iran has so far launched nearly 400 missiles and drones at Israel, though only a few dozen have made it past Israeli air defense. Those strikes have reportedly killed 24 people by this point, but there's no doubt that Israel is having far more success than their opponent is, especially in achieving total control of Iranian airspace. Trump's comment on Monday night was, "Iran should have signed a deal. I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life." Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Almost immediately after that statement, the roads out of Tehran were sent into gridlock, with endless lines of cars trying to flee the city in the middle of the night. Additionally, the United States recently diverted one of its aircraft carriers and its escort to the Middle East from the Pacific, further fueling speculation about possible U.S. participation, particularly when it comes to knocking out Iran's Fordow uranium enrichment site, which is buried deep underground and encased in concrete. The U.S. is believed to be the only country with the bunker buster bombs and large B-2 stealth bomber aircrafts that would be required to take out that facility. Israel, for their part, has been clear that their operation will not be considered a success until Fordow is destroyed. There's also been speculation that the conflict could result in the complete collapse of the Iranian regime, although Israel has stated that this is not their primary goal, even if it might end up being the result. In other world affairs, on Monday at the G7 summit, President Trump and Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a trade agreement to cut tariffs between our two countries. A copy of the general agreement was released by the White House. It set a 10% tariff for the first 100,000 vehicles imported to the United States from Britain. The agreement also removed a whole host of tariffs on aerospace products. While the outline does not set final terms for trade on steel and aluminum, it said that the British government would work to meet America's standards for supply chain security. President Trump wound up leaving the economic summit early. On Monday, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said in a post on X that President Trump had a great day at the G7, even signing a major trade deal with the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Much was accomplished, but because of what's going on in the Middle East, President Trump will be leaving tonight after dinner with heads of state. The change in the president's plans coincided with his post warning the residents in Tehran to leave the city immediately. Earlier on Monday, the president confirmed that Iran had reached out through intermediaries to negotiate an end to the conflict. The president summed up, "I'm not in the mood to negotiate." While still at the summit, he had said, quote, "They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days and they had 60 days. On the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk immediately before it's too late." At the summit, world leaders floated a draft of a statement that pushed both sides of the Israel-Iran conflict to negotiate. Trump reportedly refused to sign. Despite this, Emmanuel Macron of France made the rookie mistake of trying to speak for President Trump, saying that he had left early from the summit to try to negotiate a ceasefire. President Trump publicly slapped him down hard on the world stage, saying that he had no idea what he was talking about and was therefore wrong. Trump proceeded to make it clear that he wants to end this through a long-term victory, not a temporary ceasefire. President Trump also got everyone's attention in yet another statement this week. He posted the following to Truth Social, quote, "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment, and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA." The use of the term "we" at the beginning of that statement caught the eye of many people around the world, given the question about whether the United States will get involved in destroying Fordow in order to eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities completely. Trump has been progressively stepping up his rhetoric towards Iran since the strikes began, calling for Iran to surrender and pointing out that the Ayatollah is an easy target, boasting, "We are not going to take him out, but our patience is wearing thin," adding that We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. In a follow-up post, Trump demanded unconditional surrender, and when a reporter asked him what that meant, he gave them the obvious answer that unconditional surrender is only a two-word sentence, meaning unconditional surrender. Trump has also been holding meetings in the Situation Room, given that the United States military has bombing capabilities that exceed Israel's and may need to deliver the final crushing blow to Iran's underground nuclear facilities. Meanwhile, in an address to all Iranians, Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah of Iran, declared that the Islamic Iranian regime that overthrew his father has come to an end, saying, "The Islamic Republic has come to its end and is collapsing. What has begun is irreversible. The future is bright, and together we will turn the page of history." Now is the time to stand up, the time to reclaim Iran. May I be with you soon. In domestic matters, it appears that Democrats may have abandoned the so-called Maryland man that they once championed as their poster boy. Suspected MS-13 gang member and apparent wife-beater Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who you may remember was deported to El Salvador, was brought back to the United States last week to appear in federal court in Nashville. On Friday, he faced federal smuggling charges there, to which he pled not guilty. The DOJ's criminal case against Abrego Garcia is separate from his immigration case. If convicted, he faces 10 years in prison for each illegal alien that he smuggled, and a $250,000 fine. Yet so far, no Democrat groups have stepped up to pay for a dream team for Mr. Abrego Garcia, and he is currently being represented by public defenders. At the 6-hour-long arraignment, a Homeland Security agent testified that multiple alleged accomplices had claimed that Abrego Garcia had asked a 15-year-old girl on Snapchat for nude photographs of herself. His lawyers called this, and I quote, a flirtatious event. Federal prosecutors have requested that Abrego Garcia remain in federal custody until his trial. The decision about that is pending, but even if the judge denies the request, Garcia could potentially be transferred to ICE custody for proceedings against him in immigration court. Either way, it looks like he will not be released to anywhere except prison or his own country of El Salvador. In other deportation news, the Trump administration seems to be possibly reversing course by reportedly telling ICE agents that they should continue to conduct immigration raids on farms, hotels, and restaurants. Last Thursday, the administration reportedly instructed ICE to halt immigration raids on these businesses because of a warning from the Department of Agriculture, which claimed that aggressive deportations in rural areas could potentially destabilize the food supply. So last week, President Trump indicated that there would be a policy change regarding deportations of workers on farms, hotels, and in leisure businesses. He said, quote, "Our farmers are being hurt badly. They have very good workers who have worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be great, and we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back." This generated pushback from some of Trump's supporters, arguing that the move was de facto amnesty and not what they voted for. Now, the Washington Post has reported that Tricia McLaughlin, an assistant secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, said, quote, "There will be no safe spaces for industries who harbor violent criminals or purposely try to undermine ICE's efforts. Worksite enforcement remains a cornerstone of our efforts to safeguard public safety, national security, and economic stability." Officials from ICE reportedly led that call, which informed agency leaders from 30 field offices across the nation that immigration raids at those workplaces would resume. This doesn't appear to be a change to me, however. It seems to indicate that raids will continue in these places in pursuit of high-priority criminal targets, but that they will continue with the policy of not specifically going out of their way to target illegals, especially in these industries who have committed no additional crime besides entering our country in a way that was against our laws. Changing gears now to the celebrity news this week. Apparently a plea deal has been accepted by the doctor who supplied ketamine to Matthew Perry before his overdose in October of 2023. According to NPR, Dr. Salvador Plasencia has agreed to plead guilty to 4 counts of distribution of ketamine in exchange for prosecutors dropping the other charges against him, which include 3 additional distribution charges and 2 counts of falsifying records. According to the deal, he now faces a maximum of 40 years in prison plus 3 years of supervised release and a fine of at least $2 million per the signed agreement. In the weeks after the Friends star died, it was revealed that Plasencia allegedly texted another doctor, Mark Chavez, saying, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." Plasencia then supplied Perry with 20 vials of ketamine, equal to 2,000 milligrams of the drug, along with additional ketamine lozenges and syringes, despite his public struggles with addiction. Dr. Plasencia's co-defendant, Jasveen Senga, nicknamed the Ketamine Queen, is one of several other defendants scheduled for trial in August in connection with Perry's overdose death. Senga is the only defendant who pled not guilty and refused to take a plea deal. The tragedies in Hollywood, unfortunately, don't end with Matthew Perry's tragic fate. Eric Dane shared an update on his ALS diagnosis this week, saying that his health has been noticeably deteriorating and that he fears that his young daughters, who are only 13 and 15, will have to grow up without a father, a thought that especially troubled him because he lost his own father to suicide when he was only 7 years old. On Monday, the 52-year-old Grey's Anatomy favorite told Diane Sawyer on Good Morning America that, "I'm angry because my father was taken from me when I was young, and now there's a very good chance I'm going to be taken from my girls when they're very young." He admitted that his disease is progressing rapidly, saying, "My left side is functioning. My right side has completely stopped working. I feel like maybe a couple of more months, and I won't have my left hand either. It's sobering." Dane also spoke of the support that he has received from his wife of 14 years, Rebecca Greatheart, saying, "We've managed to become better friends and better parents. She is probably my biggest champion and my most stalwart supporter, and I lean on her. In my heart, I don't feel like this is the end for me. I'm fighting as much as I can. There's so much about it that's out of my control." Dane was diagnosed with the awful degenerative disease back in April. As you are probably aware, ALS is a progressive disease that affects the nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. Over time, individuals with ALS may lose the ability to speak, move, eat, and even breathe independently. ALS has no cure, and people who receive this diagnosis usually live 3 to 5 years after symptoms start. However, some people live for decades following their diagnosis, such as renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, who lived with ALS for more than 50 years after being diagnosed at the age of 21. He survived until 2018. And I'm sure all of you join me in wishing Eric Dane only the best. In government tragedy, waste, fraud, and abuse continue to be uncovered. According to the Daily Wire's own Luke Rosiak, under Joe Biden, USAID awarded an $800 million contract to a business operating out of a Virginia home, even after it had ruled that the business's key manager lacked honesty or integrity, referencing the fact that according to a May 12th guilty plea, he had secured USAID contracts for decades through the use of bribes. The contract that he was awarded after that was all uncovered was for him to address, quote, issues affecting the root cause of irregular migration from Central America to the United States, the work that Biden had assigned to Vice President Kamala Harris and which she never appeared to address. This company, Vistant, hatched a criminal scheme which exploited a DEI policy called A8 contracting, which lets the government award contracts with no competition or limited competition if the recipient is from a racial minority or a small business. The Department of Justice announced on Friday that Walter Barnes III, the founder of this government contractor, Vistant, previously known as PM Consulting Group, and Roderick Watson, who is a USAID contracting official, both pled guilty to a bribery scheme in which Barnes and 2 others conspired to pay Watson at USAID $1 million in exchange for him giving them $544 million in USAID contracts. What has not been widely reported is that the Biden administration continued to steer contracts to Vistant, such as the migration contract and others that are still active, even after it knew about the massive corruption regarding the $544 million contract in the indictment. The company that Vistant partnered with is Collaborate Up, who was put in charge of contracting reform at USAID and then gave itself a massive contract. In exchange for the $800 million contract that they received, Collaborate Up said it would address the irregular migration from Central America to the United States by addressing climate change. You're going to fix climate change. You're going to stop immigration by making the thermometer go down. Why don't I believe you? So after partnering with Vistant, who criminally corrupted the USAID contracting process, Collaborate Up was then put in charge of USAID contract reform, which led to them landing a massive contract for themselves based on promises of nonsense, after which they put a former USAID official on their payroll. That all sounds like real above-board behavior that you would want in your government. In other branches of government, on Tuesday, another federal judge, this time Julia Kobik of Boston, issued another injunction against the Trump administration, this time blocking them from being able to bar the use of gender identities on passports, as opposed to requiring a person to list their biological sex, which is all we care about because your identity is your own business. Just like my identity is my business, it's not an identifying feature. And a passport is a form of ID. This April ruling that originally applied to 6 plaintiffs who sued the federal government was one that Kobik had the right to make for those individuals while their case was being heard. But now she has granted the plaintiff's request to make the lawsuit a class action, which will expand the ruling to all people. The court order allows the X designation to be reinstated as well for so-called non-binary people, meaning people who are their own individual mix of personality traits, as in everyone. But not all judiciary decisions this week were bad. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to uphold Tennessee's right to govern its own state by creating a law that prohibits the use of transgender drugs and surgeries for children in the state of Tennessee who do not have a physical medical condition such as precocious puberty. This is a major win for conservative activists and parent groups. As I said, the ruling was 6-3, so it was a 2/3 consensus, which is a much clearer consensus than many other rulings we've gotten from the Supreme Court. However, the media is trying to sell this as the ruling of a fractured Supreme Court, a case that they never made for rulings that they happen to like, which were actually split down the middle in 5-4 votes. 2/3 of the judges sitting on our nation's highest court, both on the right and on the left, ruled that Tennessee's law does not violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the court's opinion, which says that the plaintiffs contort the meaning of the term medical treatment. Notably absent from their framing is a key aspect of any medical treatment, the underlying medical condition the treatment is intended to address. Roberts also rejected the plaintiff's argument that Tennessee's law discriminates on the basis of sex. He rejected that claim on the grounds that this ruling applies to both males and female minors who have gender dysphoria. pointing out that the identity of considering oneself to be transgender is not a third category of sex. He said, "The law does not prohibit conduct for one sex that it permits for the other. Under SB 1, no minor may be administered puberty blockers or hormones to treat gender dysphoria, gender identity disorder, or gender incongruence, and minors of any sex may be administered puberty blockers or hormones for other purposes." So there is no discrimination in either direction. Roberts also noted that the number of minors who have begun requesting sex transition treatments has skyrocketed in recent years, while there have been rising debates regarding the relative risks and benefits of such treatment, including European countries who are now cracking down on these very procedures and drugs. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote his own concurring opinion, saying there is no medical consensus on how best to treat gender dysphoria in children, noting, "Recent revelations suggest that leading voices in this area have relied on questionable evidence and have allowed ideology to influence their medical guidance." Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Samuel Alito also wrote concurring opinions, while Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a dissent that was joined by Justices Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson. The Tennessee law that was upheld in Thursday's Supreme Court ruling blocks all transgender medical treatments on children in the state of Tennessee, including puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. Children with physical conditions that are serious enough to warrant the use of puberty blockers, despite the side effects, will still have access to them, as will children of both sexes who require the administration of their own sex's hormones due to a physical medical condition. But neither sex will have access to the hormones of the opposite sex, which produces major complications in the body of the sex to which they are unnatural, until they are adults, when they can decide for themselves if they still want to take that risk. Both puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones come with serious health risks. Puberty blockers can affect bone growth and density, causing osteoporosis and sexual dysfunction, voice damage, and infertility, and much more, while cross-sex hormones can cause infertility, deadly blood clots, heart attacks, increased risk of both breast and ovarian cancers, increase the risk of needing a hysterectomy, cause liver dysfunction, worsening psychological illness, and other serious conditions. And of course, gender surgeries like phalloplasties, vaginoplasties, and double mastectomies are irreversible and often come with serious complications of their own that are too horrifying for me to describe here. Doctors who offer these treatments in Tennessee, despite the law, will now risk losing their medical licenses and be fined $25,000. The law also gives children and their families the right to sue if they were harmed by gender-affirming treatments, which is the part that is most likely to end these practices more than anything else, as the loss of money always overrides everything else. While the Biden administration actually joined the lawsuit against this Tennessee law, this is only the second time that the Supreme Court has weighed in on this very heated, although also very one-sided, culture war issue. Prior to this, the Supreme Court has often avoided many opportunities to get involved. However, their latest ruling is expected to have broader implications for the other 20 states with bans on the same transgender medical interventions for minors. Continuing our news tour around the branches of the American government, the nation's favorite governor, Ron DeSantis of Florida, always leads the way in showing the country what can actually be accomplished if a leader is serious about doing his job for the people who elected him. He actually can get real stuff done. In his most recent example, DeSantis charted 4 flights to bring home roughly 1,500 Jewish Americans who need to be evacuated from Israel. The Americans, who were originally on a 10-day birthright Israel trip, took an Israeli cruise vessel to Cyprus under the protection of the Israeli Navy, and now DeSantis has chartered 4 wide-bodied jetliners to bring them from Cyprus back home to Tampa, Florida. The Jerusalem Post reported that the remainder of the 2,800 international participants who were in Israel when war broke out on Friday have chosen to depart via other means or have chosen to stay in Israel with family. This is not the first time that DeSantis has heroically stepped in while other people with more power than him sat on their hands. You may recall the incident I'm referring to, which happened back in October of 2023, 2 weeks after Hamas massacred more than 1,200 people in Israel, including at least 30 Americans. DeSantis ordered an emergency airlift then, too, which brought home 200 Americans. He also sent 2 large planes containing 85 pallets of donated supplies to Israel. Florida also donated more than 1,000 toys, over 300 sleeping bags, thousands of hygiene products, and articles of clothing. At the time, DeSantis deservingly ripped into the Biden administration, saying, "With the lack of leadership in Washington, we are stepping up to help our allies in Israel, who are in need of supplies and our support. As we continue to bring back Americans who were stranded in Israel when the war began, we will also keep sending the necessary healthcare supplies to Israel to care for those who have been injured." And when it comes to caring for the people inside our borders, a bill that strips free healthcare from illegal immigrants in Minnesota was signed into law this week, only days after Minnesota's Democrat House leader, Melissa Hortman, was assassinated. Hortman was the lone House Democrat to vote in favor of the bill, although it was clearly difficult for her. But Hortman commented that, quote, "Minnesotans expect that when Democrats and Republicans are elected to co-govern in the state legislature, that we would compromise and get things done and fund their state government, and that's exactly what we did." Tim Walz posted the following to X on Tuesday, quote, "I signed the final bills Melissa Hortman shepherded through the most narrowly divided legislature in the country. All of them bipartisan. We debated, we found common ground, and we compromised. That's how democracy should function." Minnesota reporter Dustin Grage said this was only possible because of Democrat leader Melissa Hortman. "We disagreed on just about every issue, but she was the only House Democrat willing to meet in the middle and deliver real results for Minnesotans. It's heartbreaking that she's gone. Her leadership in this moment will not be forgotten, and her legacy will live on long after all of us. Life is fragile. Hold your loved ones close. Political violence is never acceptable. Pray for peace." Unfortunately, there are many areas in the world in which peace is not yet an option. Back in Israel, Iranian missiles directly struck a major hospital on Thursday morning. The Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba is the only level 1 trauma center in southern Israel. It treats Jews, Arabs, and Bedouins, and it serves more than 1.2 million residents, including more than 400,000 children. Patients at the hospital told I-24 News, "We heard the siren, ran into the stairwell, and then there was a huge explosion. The ceiling literally flew off." The missile directly hit a ward that had thankfully been evacuated around 24 hours earlier. According to the Israeli Health Ministry, the impact caused some minor injuries and damaged parts of the emergency room and other buildings, but the hospital was able to continue operating. Israel's health minister said the missile launch at the Soroka Medical Center is an act of terrorism and a crossing of a red line, a war crime by the Iranian regime that was deliberately committed against innocent civilians and medical teams dedicated to saving lives. He is correct about that, by the way. The Geneva Convention specifically forbids the targeting of hospitals. Meanwhile, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, posted this on X. "The cowardly Iranian dictator sits in the depths of the fortified bunker and fires aimed shots at hospitals and resident buildings in Israel. These are war crimes of the most serious kind, and Khamenei will be held accountable for his crimes. The Prime Minister and I have instructed the IDF to increase the intensity of attacks against strategic targets in Iran and against government targets in Tehran in order to remove threats to the State of Israel and undermine the Ayatollah's regime. While visiting the location of another missile impact site in Halan, Katz described Khamenei as the modern Hitler, saying, "Without question, this man should no longer continue to exist." Israel's President Isaac Herzog added, "In moments like these, we are reminded of what's truly at stake and the values we are defending. A baby in intensive care, a mother by their bedside, a doctor rushing between beds, an elderly resident in a nursing home. These were some of the targets of Iran's missile attack on Israeli civilians this morning." As promised, the Israelis struck back. IDF footage showed the Israeli Air Force striking Iran's inactive Arak heavy water reactor. According to the IDF, it struck the reactor's core seal, which, quote, is a key component in plutonium production. Additionally, Israel believes that it has destroyed 2/3 of Iran's missile launchers, leaving the mullahs with around 100 left, which is why Iran's strikes have plummeted in intensity since their first strike. And no matter how many missiles Iran has, if they have no launchers with which to fire them at Israeli cities, those missiles are useless, which is probably why Khamenei has been reduced to rage tweeting at the world from a bunker where he waits to die. If only the internet was real life, dude, you might stand a chance. And in battles at home, the United States Border Patrol agents found and shut down a massive tunnel linking Tijuana, Mexico, to San Diego, California, built to unlawfully smuggle narcotics into the United States. The 3,000-foot-long tunnel, extending more than 1,000 feet into United States territory, featured a sophisticated ventilation system, electrical wiring, lighting, and a rail track for transporting drugs. No invasion, eh? 6 Mexican drug cartels have been designated as foreign terrorist organizations. Maybe California should have hired these people to build their high-speed rail project instead of Gavin Newsom. It would have been done years ago, probably under budget.
All right. I am really sorry for my horrible voice right now, but in between recording this week's headlines and recording the headlines from the weekend, I got sick and have completely lost my voice, as you can hear. So I have 2 choices right now. I can scrap the entire episode, even though I am really trying to give my all to this podcast, and it's just part of my nature to try to fight against the urge to give up. Or I can give you all the choice, and you as the listener can decide. If you just can't take it, that's completely okay. I get it. And hopefully I'll see you back next time. And if you're someone who wants to keep listening, boy, are you a trooper. I really appreciate it. So on Wednesday, elected officials for the state of Oregon turned over the House floor to 2 drag queens who danced around the chamber wildly as they performed a flamboyant lip sync routine as a part of a Democrat resolution to celebrate the artistry of Black drag performers. This prompted a backlash over their decision to use a legislative chamber for political theater. According to the New York Post, the resolution that is responsible for all of this was introduced by Representative Travis E. Nelson, a Democrat who is also the state's first Black LGBTQIA+ House member. Nelson told the drag queens, quote, "Your presence, artistry, and courage are a powerful reminder of the joy, resilience, and cultural impact of drag in Oregon and beyond. Thank you for sharing your light with us this morning." End quote. Meanwhile, GOP State Representative Dwayne Juncker posted footage of the performance on X along with this statement. I'm not sure the Founding Fathers envisioned taxpayer-funded legislative chambers being turned into platforms for political theater. The House floor is meant for serious debate, lawmaking, and serving all Organians, not partisan spectacles designed to push cultural agendas. The persistent abuse of the public's goodwill, which is perpetually being crammed down those same live and let live people's throats, might have something to do with our next story. A spokesperson for the group Heritage of Pride confirmed that about a quarter of their corporate sponsors had either reduced their contributions to New York City's Pride Parade or pulled out completely, leaving organizers scrambling to replace their rapidly disappearing funds. The event is happening next week, and at last count, the organizers are facing a shortage of about $750,000. According to the New York Times, 4 of the 5 companies that were platinum sponsors last year either scaled back their contributions or canceled them. These companies include Garnier, Sky Vodka, Target, and MasterCard. Pepsi and Nissan are also not contributing funds this year. Several other cities have reported similar results, leading to some Pride events in large cities being completely canceled. This pulling back from Pride is becoming a trend with major retailers. Social media is buzzing with photos of patriotic apparel displays in Target stores, whereas just 2 years ago, these same displays would have been decked out in rainbow flags. Now, almost all of that has been replaced with red, white, and blue. But that is not the only disaster that we have to report this week. At around 11 p.m. on Wednesday, a SpaceX Starship exploded as it prepared for its 10th flight test at SpaceX Starbase in southern Texas. SpaceX attributed the event to a major anomaly, and no one was injured, thankfully, in the massive explosion. According to the live stream video of the incident, the rocket experienced 2 explosions, one after the other, before debris rained down on the surrounding areas. Musk himself said that, quote, preliminary data suggests that a nitrogen COPV in the payload bay failed below its proof pressure. If further investigation confirms that this is what happened, it is the first time ever for this design, end quote. In some more bad news, according to Breitbart News, assaults against ICE officers have increased by 500%. DH Assistant Secretary Tricia McClellan told them just this week an ICE officer was dragged 50 yards by a car while arresting an illegal alien sex offender. Every day, the men and women of ICE put their lives on the line to protect and defend the lives of American citizens. End quote. ICE did successfully arrest that illegal alien, and the officer is expected to make a full recovery. Additionally, the Daily Wire reported that Antifa rioters have also attacked an ICE building in Portland, Oregon on Wednesday night, forcing agents to use rubber bullets and flashbangs to disperse the mob. And of course, anti-ICE riots in LA led President Trump to deploy National Guard and the Marines. Riots have also spread to Seattle and San Francisco, as well as to other prominent blue cities. McClellan criticized Democrat politicians for contributing to the violence against ICE agents, saying, "Make no mistake, Democrat politicians like Hakeem Jeffries, Major Wu of Boston, Governor Tim Walz, and Mayor Bass of Los Angeles are contributing to the surge in assaults of our ICE officers through their repeated vilification and demonization of ICE." From comparisons to the modern-day Nazi Gestapo to glorifying rioters, the violent rhetoric of these sanctuary politicians is despicable. This violence against ICE must end. The worst offender of all on this front is Nashville's own mayor, Freddie O'Connell, who went so far as to dox federal agents who were working with local law enforcement. O'Connell said the names were released by mistake, but it seemed very intentional to everyone. O'Connell had said that he was frustrated by a raid where 196 illegal aliens were arrested in Nashville, of which 95 of them had prior criminal convictions or pending criminal charges. Another 31 had re-entered the United States after being previously deported. In other disgraceful acts on Thursday, House Republican Representative Max Miller of Ohio, who is Jewish, was heading into work when he was allegedly run off the road by a deranged man who was displaying a Palestinian flag before he fled the scene. He described the incident in a post on X, saying, "The deranged hatred in this country has gotten out of control. Today I was run off the road in Rocky River, and the life of me and my family was threatened by a person who proceeded to show a Palestinian flag before taking off. We know who this person is, and he will face justice. As a Marine, a proud Jewish American, and a staunch defender of Israel, I will not hide in the face of this blatant anti-Semitic violence." He added, "You have an issue? Take it to our office. You want to run me off the road? That's a different story. We know who you are, young man, and the police are going to be paying you a visit." Miller has filed a police report with the U.S. Capitol Police as well as the local police department. Hate crimes against Jews in the United States have spiked ever since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Polling from 2024 showed that most American Jews understandably feel less safe or have directly experienced anti-Semitism in the last year. The House recently passed a resolution condemning anti-Semitic violence in the United States after the firebombing in Boulder, Colorado, which targeted Jewish demonstrators, including a Holocaust survivor, who were peacefully gathering in support of the hostages that had been brutally kidnapped by Hamas and continue to be held. And recently there was, of course, the killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C., and, of course, the arson attack on the home of Pennsylvania's Democrat Governor Josh Shapiro, who is Jewish. That's all in addition to the Jewish students and private citizens who have been attacked across the country on our campuses and in our streets by violent pro-Palestine activists. On Friday, the U.S. Capitol Police did arrest 36-year-old Ferris S. Hamden on charges of aggravated menacing. The Capitol Police Acting Chief Sean Gallagher said, "This case is a prime example of the USCP's stance towards threats against our elected officials. We will continue to have a zero-tolerance policy." In other unacceptable acts, it has been exposed that both Russia and Iran are actively attempting to sow division, specifically targeting the MAGA movement. According to the Network Contagion Research Institute report, both of these regimes are attempting to do this by creating the appearance of an existing division within the group by amplifying deceptive voices and opinions that are masquerading as MAGA loyalists. In CRI's report titled "False Flags and Fake MAGA, How Foreign and Inauthentic Networks Use Fake Speech to Destabilize the Right from Within," reveals how Russia and Iran's coordinated playbook delegitimized every fresh headline as a false narrative, amplified Tehran's propaganda, and accused Donald Trump of complicity and moral corruption. These efforts were designed to exploit what the Institute called a false flag reflex, a conditioned response that turns every major atrocity into a trigger for trending conspiracy theories. The report listed the Uvalde, Texas shooting, the October 7th Hamas massacre of more than 1,200 people in Israel, the attempted Trump assassinations, as well as other domestic attacks as examples of this. Quote, in the days following these crises, Kremlin-affiliated propagandists and Iranian state-linked media are able to rapidly inject narratives that were taken up by MAGA imposter influencers who then inject them into MAGA-branded spaces, often within minutes of breaking news. During one such activation window, 650,000 posts supporting false flag conspiracies drew what was made to look like nearly 4 million interactions, powered by a pipeline of Kremlin-affiliated propagandists, spam bot networks, and domestic influencers such as Nick Fuentes, Jake Shields, and Jackson Hinkle. These figures, who have long been associated with right-wing cultural commentary, first used their platforms to propagate Kremlin-seeded narratives. In the lead-up to the war with Iran, this network then pivoted outwards and amplified false Iranian claims that the International Atomic Energy Agency was operating under foreign control, which is an echo of Tehran's strategic messaging. Findings suggest that what appears to be grassroots disillusionment may in fact reflect foreign-directed efforts to fracture American identity from within. If you get offline and talk to actual Republicans right now, more than 80% of them support the war against Iran, according to polls and an NCRI analyst who was interviewed by the New York Post. If you go on Twitter, you get the sense that there's a civil war raging. This is exactly the purpose of the psychological operation, to destabilize people's perceptions of institutions that are supposed to protect us. To identify key narrative drivers, NCRI analyzed X accounts with the highest audience engagement on foreign flag posts. The leading amplifiers split into two dominant clusters. One, foreign-linked actors, and two, U.S.-based influencers with MAGA branding who gave the campaign domestic legitimacy. What is most telling is, despite differing origin points, the accounts converge in timing, tone, and target, suggesting coordinated amplification across aligned ecosystems. So what's the takeaway here? In the words of Tom Mack, the internet ain't real life. So don't believe in what you see there too much, because it can easily be gamed. When you feel yourself becoming disillusioned, disconnect and touch grass. Meanwhile, in more domestic news, an illegal alien who is suspected of being a member of the foreign terror organization Trinity Aragua has been charged with attempted murder of a U.S. federal officer after he violently resisted arrest and attacked both the FBI and Homeland Security agents who were trying to lawfully apprehend him. The 30-year-old Venezuelan illegal alien is Gabriel Hurtado Carrico. He is now facing federal charges for injuring one agent by slamming his head against the pavement and putting another agent in a chokehold and refusing to let go until he was placed in a chokehold himself by the other agent. After the attack, Hurtado Carrico fled on foot before being successfully recaptured by the federal agents at his apartment. The injured agent was then transported to the hospital. The Attorney General Pam Bondi stated that deadly violence against law enforcement officers will not be tolerated by this Department of Justice. We have charged this illegal alien with attempted murder. U.S. Attorney Leslie A. Woods added, federal law enforcement officers are tasked with enforcing the laws of the United States, and they must be able to do so safely. These federal agents maintained their professionalism while being met with potentially fatal violence. Despite sustaining injuries, the agents did not give up and made a successful arrest. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche summed up, the arrest and prosecution of this vicious Trinidad gang member underscores our unwavering commitment to protect our law enforcement officers in the line of duty. Violent attacks from terrorists against those who serve our communities will be met with swift and decisive justice. And indeed, the violent illegal criminal with no right to be in our country instead of his own has already appeared before a judge who ordered that he is going to remain in law enforcement custody. Hurtado Kaneko could now face up to 20 years in prison if convicted of his crime, after which he is, of course, facing deportation.
On Friday, left-wing activists allegedly tipped off an illegal alien who is a convicted child rapist in order to help him escape from ICE. ICE's Denver field office posted this to X. This morning, ICE and FBI Denver were attempting to arrest Jose Reyes Leon Diaz, a criminal alien from El Salvador who is convicted of and wanted for child rape in Italy. During our surveillance of Leon, members of Colorado Rapid Response arrived on scene and alerted him to law enforcement presence, which allowed him to escape arrest. Colorado Rapid Response is a far-left anti-ICE organization that's been responding to immigration raids, and they need to be held responsible for any child who is hurt because of their irresponsible actions. ICE Denver condemned the group and others like it, saying, groups like this interfere with ICE's ability to keep communities safe. If you know his whereabouts, do not approach. If seen, instead, report all info to ICE at 1-866-347-2423. This past week, the Justice Department announced that it's also going to be pursuing more charges against suspects who are accused of taking part in the violence during anti-ICE riots, especially those in California. However, the big news of the week came on Sunday, when the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, delivered a statement to the American people regarding Operation Midnight Hammer, saying, last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program, but it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon, full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold, and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning, not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first turn, Iran found out that when the President of the United States says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he meant 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He said it before, and he meant it. I want to give recognition to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job. He and his staff, all of CENTCOM policy. Across the board, this was a joint effort. An across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly, and I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of those nuclear sites, in and out and back, without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001, and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speaks to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear, we will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the United States and know that he means it, every word. We want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops, God bless America, and we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also delivered a statement to America on Sunday, right after the Secretary of Defense, regarding the military details of Operation Midnight Hammer, saying, "Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night, on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint forces. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphics on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of a plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airstrip, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint forces does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk plane attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the President stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retained the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons released, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace, and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile system did not see us throughout the mission. we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the President stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle carnage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all of these sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircrafts participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history, and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurula elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the President clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was a great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our war fighters on their way home and our deployed service members in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much. And on ABC's This Week, Vice President Vance answered what has been deemed the big question, even though most people already knew the answer to it. Quote, "No, we are not at war with Iran, John," Vance said. "We are at war with Iran's nuclear program. And I think the President took decisive action to destroy that program last night." Vance stressed that Trump has consistently stated that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, but he has no interest in the leadership of Tehran. Quote, "We don't want to achieve regime change. We want to achieve the end of the Iranian nuclear program." Vance also warned Iran against retaliating against the United States, saying, "If the Iranians attack us, they're going to be met with overwhelming force. We did not attack the nation of Iran. We did not attack any civilian targets. We didn't even attack military targets outside of the 3 nuclear weapons facilities." Vance further asserted that one cannot expect peace in the troubled region of the Middle East if Iran were allowed to get their hands on a nuclear weapon, saying it would lead to absolutely disastrous military conflict all over the Middle East. We don't want that. Our Gulf Arab allies don't want that. Israel doesn't want that. Vance insisted that stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is one of the few issues that unites the Arabs and the Israelis, saying they know it would lead to the opposite of peace. The president, more than anybody, is worried about protracted military conflicts. That is not what we're getting ourselves involved in. What we're getting ourselves involved in is a very targeted effort to eliminate the Iranian nuclear program. That will continue to be the goal of American foreign policy. And it's that goal that is going to motivate our actions in the weeks and months to come. I would scream woo-hoo right here if I could, but I can't. So I'm just going to whisper, who's bad? Our boys in those B-2s, that's who. And if you are still listening, what a trooper you are. That's it for me. You're all caught up in what happened last week, and thank you for listening to today's episode. Please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking like and follow, because that's what does the trick in making these things successful. And I hope you come back again next week, when hopefully I'll have my voice back. Until then, have an excellent week, my friends.